Hello and welcome to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. My name is Matt Ham. This is Kevin Adams. We are the co-founders of UPrint, a faith and personal development organization right here in Wilmington, North Carolina, coming to you live from the Standard Glass Studios at Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7 FM. We're here with you guys every single Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. The show is rebroadcast on the Big Talker 106.7 FM every Sunday from 12 to 2. We also have a podcast, Wake Up Our Faith, on iTunes. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, just making ourselves available to you guys in many different, a variety of channels and mediums to talk about faith and how we begin to live it out between Sundays. That's kind of the purpose of the show. This show is made possible by our corporate partners, one of those being Dr. Greg Veeman and his ministry, Everlasting Strength, located right here in Howell Creek Landing, just north of Mayfair. Dr. Veeman can be reached, and his team can be reached at 910-256-2100. We also want to recognize Chris Hutchins and his team at Guaranteed Rate Mortgage. Chris has more than 20 years of experience, has a fantastic team of people there. Would encourage you guys to reach out, especially in this area post-Hurricane Florence. There's a lot of different things that you might want to check into in regards to your mortgage, maybe your financial position. Make sure you use Chris and his team as a resource, 910-344-0304. Kevin, introductions aside, happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday to you.
What have we on the docket today for our audience?
Well, I think you had wanted to step into the idea of what's in people's hearts rather than in front of their eyes. Walk by faith, not by sight. Some of that kind of stuff. So go ahead. Yeah.
No, the point being is it seems like so often we want to do the work of focusing on other people and outside circumstances rather than pausing and really focusing on the condition of our own heart. It's like we're more concerned about what's in our news feed on social media than we are about what's going on inside of us. And so the taking the time and the necessary time to pause and reflect on that is really, really interesting because most people just simply aren't. You know, I was listening to an interview with Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and it was really interesting because this guy's a action movie star now, but, started out as pretty much a thug, got arrested a ton when he was in high school and just shared some various experiences that kind of led him to this inward reflection that said, this isn't who you want to be. And one of the things that he mentioned that's very poignant and what we'll talk about in our show is he said, I had some mentors who were willing to invest in me that made all the difference in the world. And that's kind of our heart as an organization is to mentor people, to help them navigate this. Yeah. Because if you're not going to do it, number one, it's hard to do it on your own. But number two, we love people, man. We care about them.
Yeah. Well, the church isn't a people, a person. It's people, right? It's working together. And I think if you want the best example, it's not looking at the building down the street, but looking at what it talks about in Acts and the beginning of the church and the heart behind that, the personality. So, mentoring is simply another word for discipleship, coaching, whatever word you want to plug in. The business community struggles with the idea of discipleship, and a lot of people do too, but that's really what it is. And I think its base level is to reinforce and force clarity. We were talking about that the other day, and you put those two words together, and I liked it a lot. I think it doesn't make you happy all the time. It's not about making you happy.
Ain't easy.
And it's not easy to carry out. Sometimes you just get battle wearied and you get tired of hearing people's problems over and over again. But at the same time, that's what we do. That's one of the core things that we do, aside from, teaching and evangelizing and reaching out to audiences and inspiring people. So we believe heavily in discipleship, and we also think that that's what's missing from the everyday Sunday kind of churchy crowd, not because they don't want to, but because logistically it's difficult. You hear a sermon, you feel like you're equipped, and then you move on, and then the week happens. Well, most people spend their time in their vocation or at some type of work, or even if it's being a mom, mothering children, that's work. It's a labor. And so discipleship goes with you throughout the week. And so that's really what mentoring is. There's a lot more to it, but that's what's needed to help clarify a lot of the junk from, the baby in the bathwater. What's important versus what's not, back to what you were talking about.
One of the things that, kind of the question, what causes someone to be in a position to be willing to do the necessary work of understanding the condition of their heart and pressing into it?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of motivators, right? Pain is a big one. But also understanding that your days are numbered, and there's this sort of idea out there that live as if you're dying, and I mean that's true, right? Yeah. But it's very cliche. It's sort of, there's some good news in it, but it's not the best news. So live as if this is your last day on earth. But really what we teach people is to live as if each day belongs to God. See, both of these are have childlike abandon to them, but only one is filled with hope. Live as if each day belongs to God. Don't live beyond it. Do have a vision and focus on that, but live in the moment and really rest in that, and bite off small pieces and take baby steps. But that's pain, failure, someone who just is there to help you. There's a lot of different things that help people get course corrected.
Yeah. Do you think people are ready for that? Do you think people want that, to live each day as if it belonged to God? I mean, what's your honest opinion on, you know what I mean? Like the condition of the human heart.
I don't care if they're ready. That's me.
Yeah.
I'll rise up, get my back up, so to speak. I don't care if they're ready. That's not our job. Our job is to say, God is always ready, and we're becoming His expression by pouring our gift set into other people. So, Jesus didn't ask the question, "Are you ready?" Mm-hmm. He just went, and they went. And if people aren't ready, what did He say? If they don't receive the peace, then you dust your feet off and you go somewhere else. Otherwise, go there. But you don't need a bunch of food and provision. Just go, and God will take care of you. Well, human nature doesn't like that. It's not logical. Mm-hmm. We like comfort. We like nice clothes and all that kind of stuff, and all that's great. But it's so
temporal.
It doesn't satisfy. That's why when something comes along that's devastating, it's it purifies things for a moment. You remember 9/11?
Yeah.
I had young kids at the time, and it was a very difficult moment for our nation. But for months, it seemed like people were kind of acting like real Christians for a while, like we are the church, instead of here's where I go, and here's my rock star that I pay every week. I'm being cynical, and I'm the one doing it. But, it's not all like that. But there's a lot of that in it, and it gets right back to that as soon as we get back into our comfortable skins.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Hurricane Florence kind of blew through here, and it seemed as if for a few weeks, everybody was kind of in that mindset, eager and so forth. But then it's like, yeah, we're back to, kind of the old way. Just, waking up, kind of protecting my box and making sure nobody enters my box. And, I think that's really what we're going to tap into today is encourage folks that like God is ready to make a move in this city, but also too in your heart. And are you willing to do the difficult work, the easy work, but difficult against your flesh of yielding to Him, of surrendering, and letting Him give you what He's got, which is better.
Yeah. Well, we definitely are not afraid to disrupt your life. if that means we've got one client and one friend along the way, then so be it. But we're going to be honest with you. We're going to force clarity, because that's what sets you free. The truth, putting light on things, and that's where healing begins. You don't go in and get half your cancer removed, right?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody would want to do that.
Get it all gone.
Why would you want to do that spiritually? You can't argue this.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of the Dwayne Johnson said that somebody had to speak truth to him.
Yes.
And tell him, you're a jerk kid, like, get yourself together.
Yeah.
But he said it changed his life.
Yes.
For the
Absolutely.
better. And so now he's a blessing to many people because of that. So, guys, you are listening to and watching Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams. We're going to come back with more right after a short break. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. Matt Ham and Kevin Adams coming to you live from the Standard Glass Studios at Howell Creek Landing. Many thanks to our friends at Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7 FM, especially Nick Craig in the production booth in the studio helping us put this together for you guys. We're here every Wednesday, 1 to 3 p.m. We want to recognize our corporate partners for making this show possible. One of those being Southern Bank, the bank Bank of Better Business. They've been serving Eastern North Carolina since 1901, providing specialized financial service. In the Mayfair branch, you can go see Lenny Smith, Leon Pruzon, or Paul McCumbee, or you can give them a call at 910-256-3657. We also want to recognize Century 21 Sawyer & Associates, a family-owned real estate organization here in southeastern North Carolina for more than 30 years. If you're buying a home, selling a home, feel free to give them a call as well, especially post-Hurricane Florence. If you have any needs that you have, any questions you might have, they could be a great resource for you. 910-256-0021. Kevin, today we're talking about kind of doing the difficult work of focusing inwardly and kind of getting honest about the condition of your heart, stepping into your best self. Sometimes that takes a lot of pain, but we're based our entire organization off of that, being there for people to help them do that and navigate this thing. And so talking with what we were talking before we left, it's often pain and adversity and confrontation that causes us to enter into, kind of focusing on this work. And I know that you have been dealing with, and we've been dealing with, confrontation. It's something we all deal with every day. So talk about how confrontation plays a role in this process.
Well, it's very practical, and it's something that people need to hear some practical steps about it. In other words, we deal with big issues, and sometimes they're kind of tree level, and so the word confrontation is something everybody can understand, and so we want to talk about that in the scope of understanding who you are, being led by the Spirit, letting it work through the soul, and then come out your hands. So the work of the Lord is done in order from Him through you for others, but one of the big obstacles in everyday life is being confronted by others, and it could be your parents, depending. And there's all kind of different things. So we're not talking about confronting people, which is one thing we do from a spiritual place, but we're talking about when we face confrontation, especially whether it's good or bad, whether it's warranted or not. We've both been through different things in our life, and anybody listening has. So how do you deal with that? No matter if it's warranted or not, what are the steps? How does that look from a place of rest, from a place of being led by the Spirit, rather than underlying behavior patterns? So that's sort of the point.
So how do we deal with confrontation?
Well, yeah. So, there's so many different things, but one of the things we teach is first you have to understand your own strongholds and what those are, and that's a whole show, right? But if you understand that there are underlying behavior patterns that are just automatic because they're subconscious and they pop out when certain things happen as a response. So we have to learn how to deal with that first. And then, this is where we start getting into confrontation with, whether it's a parent, a friend, someone who cares about you. They mean well, but they're not necessarily treating you the way that you would like for them to, respectfully or whatever, and they don't even know they're doing it. So how do you deal with that? That is where we get into another stage of mentoring, where we help you learn how to navigate the strongholds of others, because you can't change them. And you can't try to modify their behavior. You have to let go of it and then build a space for you to navigate through, so that you have a good relationship, or, obviously dust your feet off and walk away. So what does that look like? We would have to use a practical example. there's just a lot of them. I don't know if you have one, but I'm willing to jump in on anything, or I can name a few.
Well, yeah, I mean, you confronted me a couple days ago about how I acted to you on the phone, and that was difficult for me. It was hard,
Yeah.
You said that something that I brought to the table was done with a tone, and I didn't even understand that was happening in the process. But when you slow down and you get beyond the defense mechanism of no, man, it's your fault. Like, deal with yourself. Like, go over there. You know what I mean? And Kevin, you're so good at that. Like, I love you for it, but it creates just so much frustration.
Not fun.
Well, because I mean, you are so intentional as a human being about making people answer for their actions. And that's what makes you wonderful. That's what makes you the best mentor that I have ever been engaged with, because you force clarity by being absolutely honest. And so what it helps me to do is to go, man, yeah, okay, I'm bringing a lack of empathy into this, or I am bringing my own struggles, and I'm letting that interfere with truth and relationship. Mm-hmm. And that happens in marriages. It happens in business partnerships.
Yeah.
And so I think one thing that I want to make known to the audience is that if you're missing something in your life, if you're struggling, chances are you're not navigating confrontations well, because you're navigating them from your own strongholds and from an inability to empathize with somebody else and where they're coming from. So that's why all this matters.
Yeah. So we will react to things automatically when we are coming from a childish place. A childlike place has that same wonderful thing underneath it, that curious nature, but it's filled with hope, and there's kindness in it. There's hopeful expectation. So you can kind of look at it that way. Am I being a brat, or am I being a curious child, wonderful, just exuberant human being? Yeah. So that's sort of the difference. But when you understand yourself, and you do, and we all struggle at times, me and you, everybody. But I think as mature Christians, we understand that, and what that's called, what happened with you, is being teachable. So someone may say this about you, or this about me, or what have you, but the difference is, and especially with you, because I've played that role in your life, is you are teachable, and that's it. That's the prize. Mm-hmm. You can learn, you can grow, and your reaction time gets better and better and better until you are in this place where God can thoroughly, completely use you, and that's my goal, because I'm here to please Him. But by doing that, it's going to help you. And I'm not always liked in the moment because of it. Not you. I mean, you're my brother and partner and friend. But, that's like marriage. You just have days. But for the people listening, and when you're dealing with the strongholds of others, what you've got to be able to do is first be free of your own, at least understand them, and know when it's you overreacting, or step into, okay, let's say, for instance, my parent always treats me this way, and I hate it. Now, I'm not talking about mine, okay? Right. But I know a lot of people that deal with this, especially people, as they get into midlife and in their 30s and have kids, and their parents don't accept them as being an adult, and they still want to micromanage everything and put weight on them and push them into this thing that they're not. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
And the way to deal with that is we can walk through that. I'm not sure how much time we've got this segment.
Yeah, we got about a minute this segment, so
we can walk through that a little bit in the next segment, just because there's so much to this.
Yeah. Well, I think,
an example.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is our willingness to navigate confrontation with grace and with love shows a lot of our spiritual maturity.
Sure.
I think right now I'm thinking of Paul and Peter, when Paul confronted Peter.
Yeah.
And I mean, that could have created just an incredible separation among the body of believers, but it didn't.
Yeah.
Because Peter was teachable, he was willing, and Paul, I think, came at it with a level of grace, but also too an assurance of like, hey man, this is what we stand
Right.
on. There was leadership there. And so I think when people can get beyond their own emotions and get beyond their own selfish
Right.
perspective of what's going on in my world, how does this make me feel? That's when growth can actually occur,
Yeah.
because it's getting beyond yourself.
Yeah. Well, and then so what we'll get into is a practical example of when other people, their behavior frustrates you and you can't change them. What do you do?
Throw them in the car. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Not that.
Most
Not
people
that.
walk away, but
Yeah.
we're going to teach you not to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, you were listening to and watching Wake Up Our Faith right here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 FM. We'll be right back. Hello, welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. Today we are talking about confrontation, something that Americans seem to be incredibly good at, so I don't know why you would tune into the show at all. Sorry, there was a little cynicism there. Confrontation, Kevin, is one of those things that it dictates quite a bit of our daily life. And this is an important conversation to have, especially as believers and Christians in this day and age, of how we hold a witness and navigate a world that's in constant commotion and confrontation. So we're going to dive into that here briefly. Want to make sure we recognize our corporate partners, one of those being Freeman Landscaping. Freeman Landscaping is the largest privately owned land and irrigation firm in eastern North Carolina. I know these folks are super busy post-Hurricane Florence trying to get things back up and running, but I know they do a fantastic job. They're literally the best out there. Since 1992, family-owned and operated, both residential and commercial. If you have any landscaping needs, make sure you give them a call, 910-796-1166. Also, Physical Therapy Services of Wilmington. That's ptservicesofwilmington.com. Serving southeastern North Carolina since 1983. Family-owned and operated with more than 100 years' experience in their offices. You can check out their new location up near Porter's Neck, as well as their location on 17th Street, 910-763-8286. So, Kevin, confrontation. One of the things you were saying before we went to break is a practical example of what this looks like to be able to bring it home for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, well, here's what confrontation typically equals in an unhealthy or a slightly off-kilter scenario where you're dealing with the strongholds of other people. So you can overcome your own through working with someone who is biblically based and understands it, has some wisdom and life experience, not a theology degree. And then you're ready. You understand you have peace, but you still have to learn how to deal with other people, and you can't change them. That's the difficulty. So, when you're in World War II and you're going into Nazi Germany, you have to learn how to deal with the enemy, how they are, because you can't change them. So I'm not saying everybody's your enemy. I'm saying you have to sort of take that mode on and take a stand. So what that stand looks like is the very first rule here is to understand that anything that you long for, that you hand over that authority, you give power to that. So even if they mean well, doesn't mean that they deserve or should have authority over your life. The very first level of authority in your life should be the Holy Spirit, should be your Father in heaven, should be Jesus. So that's it. That's the Holy Family. So that is where you have to start. So, but so many people, because they don't understand that, they want to take authority. And it's really particular with parents and children, because children grow up and you got the whole empty nest thing. It's very difficult to let go, and sometimes parents don't, and sometimes they never do. So I'm using that one because that one's very volatile, because there's a lot of love there. But it can be a boss, an ex-boss. It can be someone who just thinks that they need to impress something upon your life, or they need to, I don't want to say stalker, but you got all kind of different people who want to impose themselves upon you in your life. It could be an ex-spouse. There's just a lot. It can be a spouse.
Well, I mean, I'm sitting here thinking about social media just in general. It's your friend feed. You give so much authority to the people in your feed on social media, as if their opinion, as if their thoughts, as if that it has any jurisdiction over your life.
That's right. Yeah, and it can be your peers at work, in the workplace. They can be great on the surface, but that can be a difficult place to navigate. The bottom line is, when you believe and trust that something is from the Lord and it's backed up by the Word, those are our caveats, you have to live that out and not let anything overtake that. So the difficulty is when you haven't grown into a mature navigation system, we tend to fight with other people. So we take our stand, which is awesome because we need to. but we will use anger and frustration, and we'll kind of lash back. So the pendulum swings back the other way, and we end up creating a worse scenario, especially with loved ones. And parents, again, are good because a lot of people don't understand the difference between honoring your parents and letting them micromanage your life. You don't have to do that to honor them. You honor them by how you live your life, not by following and agreeing everything they say. So that's an example. But, what you have to do is establish what it is that the picture of this relationship that you want. What does your path look like? So that you establish that beforehand. And this takes practice. You have to understand it. But what happens is when you get into that confrontational situation, then you're prepared. You already know, okay, when this happens or these words are said, I no longer, they have no power over me. But I'm not angry about it either. They bounce off. So I don't want to be cliche or weird, but that's, you have to go into that mode prayerfully in your quiet time. Picture what you want, and then when you're confronted, you can deal with it. So I've got another example, but that's you.
Yeah, well, the thing I'm sitting here thinking is it boils down to me is we have to be incredibly intentional about every relationship we're in, define that relationship, understand where we give authority, and understand kind of where our peace resides.
That's right.
Because if you're letting your peace reside in other relationships and you haven't taken the time to define those relationships, all of a sudden you think, well, this person's telling me that I'm an idiot. So then all of a sudden you take on the idiot thing and you go, well, I guess I'm an idiot. Or you fight back, I'm not an idiot, you're an idiot.
Right.
And so you swing back and forth emotional.
That's right.
Instead of being absolutely still and understanding where authority comes from.
Right.
Welcome
to early Peter, middle Peter, and late Peter. Late Peter, the guy jumping off the boat, is the guy that we want to be like. Of course, we want to be like Jesus. For all those who say, don't be like Peter, be like Jesus. Whatever, come on. We're using scriptural examples to show human behavior in its real state, and we all want to be like Jesus, but that comes from within. But there are things that we can look at, and Peter's a great example. But yes, that's exactly right. We don't need to take on what people say about us. There's so many different things here, your own church. And listen, we've been through all of this over and over again to the point where you get tired of it. So you have to, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, what changes people, grows them up. A lot of it is pain, but whatever the case, it can be failure. Whatever the case, you have to learn what your future looks like to you. And you have to establish that ground. Think of it as pulling up the fence posts. Think of those, cow fences, if you will. That's how I see it. You pull that fence post up and you run it out even further, and then you stick it into the ground, and you take new ground, so that when your ex-boss or your spouse or friends, so-called friends, or whatever, anyone, good or bad, says this to you and tries to put that on you, you know how to deal with it. And I'll use a kind of an example of parenting to help clarify that further. I guess we got a minute or so here.
We got a minute and a half or so.
So listen, I'm not saying people are like your kids. I'm saying you have to have the same strategy. You mentioned intentional. So think about when you parent. When we were, our kids are grown up and everything, and we're even grandparents. So it's when you parent, especially little kids, and you're right in the thick of it, and you got a beautiful family, so you learn early on that you can crush the spirit of your children if you parent, or if you discipline with anger. So the best way, and I'm sure you will agree with this, is to let the thing settle down. When your child does something that it requires discipline, let it settle down, reapproach without the anger, but you still have the same firmness. So you may address your child as, okay, here's what we're doing, here's why, and I love you, and I got joy in my heart, and we're doing this, and I'm firm on it, and that's that. So if you're sending them to their room or whatever it is you're doing, you're not allowing them to take authority back over you by throwing a fit or, hey, mom and dad, I want to stay in the bed with you. And, well, you're not. You're not gonna. I love you. I'm happy. I'm sorry this is tough for you. I got stuff to do. I'm moving on. Mm-hmm. But you can't do that if you're emotionally led with negative emotion. You have to know going into it, this is how this is going to look, and this is how I'm going to finish. That's how you navigate the strongholds of others. Make sense?
Yeah. It's a big conversation, and one that's incredibly important, because I find myself going, I don't do that. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back for more right after this. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams, Wake Up Our Faith. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams with you live from the Standard Glass Studios right here in Howell Creek Landing. The show is produced by Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7 FM. I want to encourage you guys to check out their daily lineup. Joe Catanacci, Chad Adams Show, Dave Ramsey, Sean Hannity, and more. We're on every weekend, Sundays, 12 to 2 p.m. Macy Cole will join us in the second hour, and we love being with you guys. Appreciate you tuning in. Today we're talking about confrontation. Huge, and very important conversation. So glad you guys stick with us. I want to thank our corporate partners for making this show possible. One of those being Fountain Financial, and our good friend Chris Riley over there, Fountain Financial Associates. They've been giving clients and families a better life for more than 20 years, and they're in the business of keeping promises. If you're looking for that type of financial advice, make sure you give Chris and his team a call, 910-256-8882. Also, the Honeycutt Group is a family-operated insurance organization right here in Wilmington, more than 10 years in the business. They're an insurance broker. I know Chad and his team are incredibly busy right now, but if you need help navigating kind of your own personal insurance needs, feel free to give them a call, 910-338-1773. Kevin, a quick side note, one of the things that's very gratifying for me, for us as an organization, is when we send folks to our corporate partners, and they come back and go, man, those guys were great.
Yeah.
We have a heart as our organization to be kind of a hub, a network for people that do great business through their own specific skill sets.
Yep.
And so we've got a great relationship, of course, with the folks at Live Oak Bank, a great relationship with the folks at Access Yoga Studio, Macy and Troy. So we've got a community of resources for you, for our listeners, to be able to tap into kind of this holistic living in your life. It's like any need that you have, we're doing the vetting process, making sure you get the best of the best. So this isn't just about a show to talk about your faith. This is about improving your life in every facet of it.
That's right.
And that's what we're here for. That's what YouPrint's all about. It's about having an excellent reputation and being partnered with folks that are excellent. So a little side note there.
Yeah, right on.
We're talking about confrontation, Kev. And you were mentioning before the break just about like kids and parents, and you said do not respond out of anger. And I'm thinking I want to hide under the table.
Well, listen, we all have to learn through experience. Trial and error, practice makes perfect. All that's cliche, but cliche for a reason. It's true. But I use that example because there's a lot of different things. I mean, if we had 3 hours, we could sit. That's what mentoring is about, right? Digging in personally, privately. But just an example of how that works, you approach people who are using their own struggles and strongholds to impress their will on you, accidentally, typically. But it can be anybody in your life that, I mean, the easy things just walk away, but you can't walk away from every relationship because we're meant to be in relationships and we're meant to love each other. So it's not as simple as dust your feet off. Yes, dust your feet off if you're not meant to minister. But for those you are, the church, you, me, us, all of our relationships, we have to approach that in a way that we can see and feel and understand practically and carry it out spiritually. So what a good example, and what I use in mentoring a lot, is when you parent, the best way to parent. So it's not saying these people are children. They're not. But sometimes when they're acting on their strongholds, they act childish. We've done it. They do it. So the way to handle that is to set the picture of what you want your life to be like, what you want this relationship to be like, ahead of time. And you said it, it's being very intentional, but it's doing it with a loving heart, a lot of grace, but very, very firmness, very much taking a stand, if you will, building a room that is a protective environment for you, so that when the, cackling, crowing words that people speak over you or try to enforce upon you, well, you got to do this, or yeah, but you're not, yeah, but, and all that kind of stuff, it starts getting in your heart. You don't have to give that authority to anybody.
Yeah.
And they don't know, what nobody knows exactly what God's saying to you. That's why you have to build intimacy with Him based in Scripture. If you do that and you free of your own strongholds, then you are absolutely ready to go with this. But it's not doing it out of anger. It's not fighting. It's not condemning. It's a beautiful delivery, but it's you at some point you just you walk out of the room and you say, this is how it is. I love you, and what's next? Because this isn't doing anything, and you don't engage it anymore.
Well, people don't understand your greatness. they don't understand
That's right.
your genius.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And they don't understand
Necessarily.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They don't understand your relationship with God.
That's right.
So when you give people authority to tell you about your greatness, that God speaks of you, and they contradict that, do you trust in more what they say, what you can see, or what He says about you? And that's where you have to have a subtle kind of shift. You know, it's funny. My wife and I were talking last night. I love when we have this opportunity. It's before we go to sleep. We just kind of lay and talk to each other. And it was really good last night because she mentioned something about the word blessed. She says, I have a hard time like mentioning that word, like saying I'm blessed or, you know, hashtag blessed or whatever. And she said, because it can kind of seem a little bit, you know, snooty or condescending, like blessed. We're just blessed because we're blessed, you know, because whatever. And it's a lot of how you use it. So there's context here. Sure. But one of the things is I reminded her, I was like, Liz, I was like, that's what God says about you.
Yeah.
You are blessed.
That's right. Deeply loved, highly favored, and blessed.
Yeah. And so don't run from what God says about you. Now, it doesn't mean you flaunt it in the street with the, you know, your brand new Rolex or whatever and be like, that's why I'm blessed.
I'm blessed.
You know, it ain't about that.
Rap star, blessed.
Right. But, you know, again, it's focusing on what God says about you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's a good place to stand on, to remember that you don't have to change the environment. You don't have to change the person. You don't have to argue with them. All that does is continue and foster negative behavior. You start arguing with somebody who wants you to do something that you don't feel led to do. They just don't have a right to do that. They have a right to do that for themselves. But some people, because of the relationships, feel like they have this an additional right. Now, listen, when you're parenting children,
yes,
and they're little, they're not adults, you have authority, period. So we're not talking about that. I was using that example as a parent to help understand that type of behavior. When people don't even realize they're doing it, they throw a fit, they try to impose their will. It could be well-intentioned. Most of the time it is. You know, I had a guy telling me one time from church, a wise guy, so to speak, and, you know, it's a long story, but he says, everything I told him, you know, God's doing this, God's given me a book to publish. I didn't do it. It's a book deal. I hate the word, and, you know, right now I've got to write this rather than go try to get income. And it's a long story, but the guy said, yeah, but you got to still put beans on the table. And I said, well, you know, either God's going to put them on my table or I'm going to do it. So, you know, I just said, thanks, but no thanks. And I left. That's the mentality. It sounds noble. It sounds good. Put your spouse first. Yeah. No, put God first. See, all gets right back in order when you take this approach. But you have to understand what that looks like ahead of time.
Yeah.
To understand how to navigate through it. But there's no anger. You're not fighting. You're just taking your stand with joy. There's joy in it. You're happy about it. No matter what's said to you, you're okay.
Yeah. I think one of the things to kind of close the show, we got like a minute left here, is just to remind people, like, this is what we do. Like, this is what we do as an organization, helping people slow down to understand that you can live this way, that you have this amazing, incredible life of impact that God has created you to live, but you're never going to live it as long as you're living under your strongholds and under the authority of people who don't need it. And so this guy right here doesn't like this, but I'm going to put the spotlight on him. Kevin is the very best that I have ever encountered at being able to walk through this with you one-to-one personally, to be able to understand how you're processing and navigating your life and to do it from a fresh place. So just want to encourage you guys to check it out. You can go to wakeupmyfaith.com to get involved in the Portable Faith community. There's links there to learn about our mentoring. But Kevin, what else do you want to add?
Well, I just wanted to say that appreciate that, and it is what we do. It's our heart. It's done with passion. And not some high-mindedness, but we're expanding it, marriage, couples, health and wellness, faith-based executive coaching, and on and on. And my wife is about to join me soon with this. So we're really expanding. Come on and support it. Jump in. We'll help you.
Well, it's exciting, man. And I had a conversation just as we close here. Somebody said, listen, I want the next level. I was like, well, you came to the right place.
Yes.
Because that's what it's about.
That's right.
That's what it's about, you know. You guys check it out, uprint.life. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams. We'll be back for a second hour with Macy Cole. Again, want to encourage you, wakeupmyfaith.com. We'll be back just in a few. Hello and welcome to Wake Up Our Faith. Kicking off the second hour here, Matt Ham, Kevin Adams. We have Macy Cole in studio. So appreciate you guys tuning in. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. Kind of an upside-down conversation about living faith out between Sundays. We believe that your best life is waiting on the other side of a real and fresh relationship with God. And we want to help you in that way. And we have conversations to kind of spur that on. Macy and her husband, Troy, are the owners of Access Yoga Plus Studio. And when Macy's in, we talk about everything from Ayurvedic soap and chakras to, just all kinds of stuff.
Irish soap,
Yeah.
not chakras.
And Yoda. So we like to have a good time, like to laugh a little bit. Hope you guys would join us. This is streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Would love for you to share this out in your communities. And if you want to connect more with us, get daily encouragement, you can do that at wakeupmyfaith.com. Macy, what's happening?
Well, I can't honestly watch you do this, Matt, anymore without thinking of your son, Matthew, who impersonated the intro of this show to a T. Even his impression was just spot on. I really want the world to see what we got to see on Friday night.
You have to get him on.
We do. All four of Matt's children are exceptionally special people. And it's just crazy to have spent time with them and now hang out with Matt right now because I see each one of them. And he is just their hero. And of course, why wouldn't he be? But seriously, it's really cool to be thinking of Matthew right now, just sitting in that seat.
Yeah, there are moments when I see myself and him and I'm like, yes, that's awesome. And then there are moments when I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't like that about myself. The beauty of intimate relationships. So Kevin, we were in the first hour talking about confrontation and just how we navigate the relationships, other people's relationships, kind of inward focusing. Mm-hmm. So how we want to bring that into this second hour with kind of, Macy, your perspective on that from the yoga world and how we navigate it all.
Well, I'll just throw this out there. Dealing with confrontational issues, people pulling from our first hour, but also something Macy had on her just walking in here was, let's get ready because difficulties are there, which it's a clear evidence if your heart belongs to God that things are great. And because we're to walk by faith, not by sight, the enemy is all about walking by sight and frightening us and scaring us out of our call. So what we talked about earlier was dealing with confrontation, and Macy mentioned reaction time. So all of that ties together, and of course I want to let Macy chime in and share her heart. But yeah, we're being intentional. We're forming a picture of what God's saying to us, and we're stepping into it with all our hearts, and we're doing it together. That's what the church looks like, and the job is to forward the kingdom. So it's imperative that we do that, and we start doing that together with our gift sets. But not to be afraid of people or the things they try to put on us or any of that kind of stuff. But step right into it with boldness, but joyful, kind, graceful hearts. Anyway, that's
I love meeting with these guys because it's almost like we sit here every single week and everything that each one of us says expounds upon the things that we've experienced over the course of the days that we weren't meeting. And that just goes directly in line with everything that God had placed on my heart to talk about today. So prior to Hurricane Florence, we were talking about yoga and why yoga. And then the next week, we started talking about the chakras, which is energetic anatomy. Mm-hmm. And we went over the first chakra and the purpose of the first chakra in our development, which starts as early as second trimester, is the idea of forming a foundation. And the way I like to think about that is that we would plant a seed and that every single thing that we become would kind of birth from that seed, right? And what I've noticed about the importance of seeds, because last week we talked about some things that have kind of been exposed post-Hurricane Florence, but something that's really powerful and necessary for a seed is strong roots. And so last week we talked about kind of the idea of shallow roots and the exposure when a big storm comes in, how a tree can be as beautiful as it wants to be, but if its roots are shallow, then it's really not bearing fruit. It's really not benefiting anyone, including themselves. And so today I wanted to kind of summarize everything that we've spoken about up to this point and go back to this idea of, in the first chakra, the first energetic anatomy, the first kind of symbolism of our existence as we're being developed, we have the kind of the confrontation of, am I going to be fearful of the world, or am I going to trust the world? And that's something that a lot of people wrestle with. And then once you identify yourself in Christ, you recognize that though there are things that happen within this world that can be scary, which is an emotion, we don't have to exist in a state of being fearful. Instead, we get to exist in a space of joy, which is a state of being. And from that space of joy, by knowing who our ownership belongs to, which is the creator of everything that has ever been and ever will be, through the sacrifice of his son, Jesus Christ, and the filling up of understanding that in the Spirit in us, that we can trust. So we immediately conquer that first question of, am I fearful of the world, or do I trust in the world? And when we put our faith in the foundation of the one that created us for our purpose, and we understand the sacrifice that was made through that brilliant, seamless story that we read throughout the entire Bible, and we let ourselves be filled by the Spirit, then that little seed that we are planted as grows deep roots. There's nothing shallow about our life, our lifestyle, who we are, our purpose, or what we know we're about to become. And so we become strong and invincible, and we become the David against the Goliath, who is not even fearful because he already knows that he's perfectly made and that everything will work according to God's will, which is all good.
David ran
Yes.
up to Goliath because he knew ahead of time what he wanted it to be.
Yes.
He knew what it was going to be. So,
Yes.
same thing.
Kevin, one of the things we've talked about in the same context is what David did before he ran, which was he declared victory ahead of it.
That's right. He prophesied victory.
Right. And it was
Same thing.
Yeah, it was a speaking out of truth ahead of the confrontation
Based on testimony.
Exactly, because of what God had done.
That's right.
Surely God delivered me from the lion and the bear. He will deliver me from the Philistine. And he basically has a moment that I feel like we get to have, is he stood up in front of the entire Israelite army as a little 15-year-old boy,
Right.
rejected the king's armor and said, there, we're going here.
That's right. It's not about logic. It's never been about what you see. It's always been about what God's saying. And that's why we have to develop our listening skills rather than our worldly intelligence. But the seed idea is interesting, because what comes from a seed, more seeds, a seed. And we can come back to it and how it develops and how we develop it, and definitely jump on that. But I think looking out ahead a little bit, what is the fruit? This is the miraculous thing about a seed that God did that we just still can't get a hold of. Some water, some plant. Only God knows how it grows. This thing has the potential to move a mountain, not because it's not about size, it's about potential of life. Life goes on and on and on and on because that's how God created it. So one seed equals infinite number of seeds, because one seed, and so on and so on. So I think that's why it's so important to grab hold of who you are as a seed, so that you can move forward in being a seed planter. So, long, big thing.
Love that.
Yeah. I mean, we've got like a minute left here in the segment, Macy, but I want to hold on to dive in a little bit deeper, because you mentioned something with this concept of seeds. Fear in soil, if you will, would destroy the potential of a seed. And the same is true of fear in our lives. And you talked about fear, how it begins to kind of predicate our conversations, it's developed very, very early on. And I think a lot of people conceptually go, yeah, I'm not afraid, I'm not fearful, yet they live as if they are. You know what I mean? They live based on some other thing.
They feel fearful. They say they're not, but they're feeling it, and that creates that vibration. It's everything. It's a long story, but yeah, it's a great point. So
yeah, and so I think today we're kind of just step into this next segment, thinking about this concept of seed, this concept of growth and producing more seeds, our potential, and then how fear wants to kind of step in and kind of destroy that. And I think that's a powerful place to start. We got a short break coming here soon. As always, we appreciate Macy joining us. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams, Macy Cole. You're watching Wake Up Our Faith right here from the Standard Glass Studios at Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7 FM. In the meantime, check out Wake Up My Faith for the Portable Faith community. We're going to take a short break. Be back right after this. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We're in the second hour here of our show every Wednesday, 1 to 3 p.m. right here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This show is also broadcast on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 FM every Sunday from 12 to 2, and then podcasted on iTunes, Wake Up Our Faith. Macy Cole, Kevin Adams, I'm Matt Ham. We're having a cool conversation today. Macy, I'll just let you kind of kick off where we are, and then we'll just see kind of where the conversation goes from there.
Well, we had started by talking about what you guys had mentioned in the first hour about confrontation. And that immediately sparked my mind to go back and kind of speak about the things that we've talked about in the previous podcast as well. So in my opinion, we've talked about the development as early as second trimester, that's where fear and trust kind of meet odds in the chakra system of yoga. And so what I've noticed is, and I love this image that Matt kind of spoke about, we were talking about a seed in the last segment, and basically if we think about us being a seed and our roots growing out from us, and what replenishes a seed and roots and all of that, it's water and it's light. Purification and light, which is our Heavenly Father. He is completely pure. He is complete light. So the same thing that nourishes a seed is the same thing that nourishes our own soul, which is communion with the Father. So the enemy grips us in these false illusions of fear, because fear is a lie. Because if we really believe that our Heavenly Father has our best interest, then when we're going through uncomfortable circumstances, we know that it is simply to deconstruct different parts of ourselves so that He can reconstruct Himself within us. So what I've noticed with fear is that when we engage in a fearful mindset or a fearful lifestyle, what we do is we stifle those roots. So those roots become shallow. We talked about that post-Hurricane Florence. So when confrontation comes up, it's typically because there is shallow roots, either within both people or within one person, or it's a disagreement that really sparks from fear, right? And so whenever we are dealing with confrontation, if we truly believe that our entire existence rests upon our Creator, and I was reading today the story of Jacob and how he goes to, he first of all gets kicked out of this empire because he's becoming too great, right? And so he goes to, and they start filling up his wells that had been given to him all the way back from Abraham, because he's becoming too wealthy. And so they think that they're going to stifle him. They're leading with fear. So then he goes to the next land and he finds some areas that he can build wells, and the people of that land start quarreling at him, and he calls that well Quarrel. Then he goes to the next land and they become hostile towards him, and so they call that land Hostility. Then he goes to a final land and he calls that land Open Spaces, because no one gets angry at him for building these wells. And so he says, at last, God has opened up a space for us to flourish and be fruitful, right? Each of these segments, the empire, the first well of quarreling and the second well of hostility, were all a basis of fear, because these people were saying, this is mine and you're trying to take it. And what I've learned from moving out of a space of fear and into a space of trust is that there is nothing that we own. God owns it all. He gives it to us according to what we can use with it. Obviously, sometimes the enemy gives people things to do his bidding as well. But when we are operating in a space of fear, we are operating from a space of shallow roots. And so when we are arguing or quarreling or having a, what's that word we were talking about, conflict with another person, immediately we have to say, what is the depths of my roots? Because if they're shallow, I'm going to lead with fear. But if they're deep, then I'm going to extract fear and trust and try to see the heart of this other person. If they're operating from a space of fear, my first goal is to expose that fear, uproot it, and replace it with deep roots. And I can do that by using myself as an example in the way that I approach them, similar to how we see all throughout the Bible.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good. It's just another way of saying, it's a good way of saying that we have to understand our own strongholds, and then we have to learn how to navigate the strongholds of others.
Yes.
Ours can be healed. Others, we can't necessarily change or manage theirs. So we have to learn how to navigate theirs. And so that's to me what, at least another way of looking at what you're saying. But ultimately, moving forward requires that we are not fearful. And, our way of looking at that and what we teach, just to throw on another window to this thing, is to lay this down every day, lay everything down at the altar in your quiet time, let go of anything that has power over you, and you have nothing. And God picks everything back up and gives it to you. There is nothing to be afraid of. And that's why David could say, the same God that saved me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from this Philistine. And that's a prayer that we can take into our own lives. Can't pay your bills. The same God that delivered David and delivered me the other day will deliver me from this moment. That's something that people can do and pull the scripture right into their lives. But the idea is you have to let go of it. And I love that you're speaking about this from a yogi teaching perspective. It's exactly the same thing, and it glorifies the Lord. But however people get it, we need to be talking about it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to throw another spin on it.
Absolutely.
Macy, in your experience, as you teach, I think talking to Troy, 1,000-ish people come through the studio every month, and you're teaching a ton of people. You're navigating a ton of relationships. What's the number one thing that you see in the lives of other people that's keeping them from pressing into this life?
Well, I think the bystander effect is a really big thing. And the bystander effect is that we witness something going on, and each one of us could take action, but we don't because we think someone else will. And so often people think that they themselves couldn't be the person that changes the world. And that, oh, well, that's Macy, and she's a yoga instructor, and her husband own this place, and she's always just been a natural speaker. Or, oh, that's Moses, and he spoke directly and walked directly with God, and he got to witness the parting of the sea. And so often people think that they can't be great. And so instead of saying, okay, these are my hopes, these are my desires, these are my dreams, I'm going to play it safe because I'm not putting my faith in the Lord. And even though when you do place your faith in the Lord, there are going to be uncomfortable places, it's kind of like the Israelites when they finally were brought out of Egypt and had a little moment of discomfort where they were just being fed manna, and they started saying how they wanted to go back and be enslaved again. And so we almost get so comfortable in our uncomfortability instead of being uncomfortable towards the unknown. And people limit themselves because they don't know that they are indeed limitless. And so they don't try to go for it because their fear of failing keeps them in a safe space where even if they fail, at least it's not towards what they really want. And that's why we want to empower people to tell them, I'm just a regular person. You are just a regular person. We are all complete humans, make mistakes daily, but we know that God has a purpose for our life, just like your life, and that there is nothing going to be ordinary about a person that steps into their extraordinary purpose by letting God fill them up.
Yeah. Well, we have to live it out.
Yeah.
To be able to speak it out with integrity and authority, and I think that's where living examples matter, and it shows the power of God in action. So people can say, "You've been saying this, and I see it in your life, and I can't deny it." Right? And
yes.
that's where we're all coming from. You're also talking about that one straggler or that one person, what we call a movement, and that person starts a movement. It's the second person that joins them is really the brave one. There's the crazy one, and then there's the brave one. And then people fall in, and they recognize, wow. I know Matt and I were just talking about the other day. Matt says, man, I can do that. He grabbed hold of something, recognized his greatness. Oprah, whoever, Jimmy Fallon, I can do that. Yes, you can. I walk into Barnes & Noble. I had a book in there once. And I walk in there and look at it now. It's not arrogant. It's like, I can do that. I did it.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it.
Yes.
We're going to lead, and without fear. We may get hit and knocked around. So what? Right?
Yes.
So it's powerful when you grab hold of that in your heart and carry it out. People can see the examples happen.
Yes.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought as we go to break here. Fear will never tell you can do something.
Wow.
I don't know if that's true or not. I'm pressing on it. It just kind of came to my heart.
And don't listen to it.
Fear would never say you can do something. Fear always says you can't do something. That's interesting to think about. Guys, wakeupmyfaith.com for the Portable Faith community. Wake Up Our Faith you're watching now. We'll be back right after this. Hello and welcome to Wake Up Our Faith. Matt Ham, Kevin Adams, Macy Cole with you every single Wednesday, 1 to 3 p.m. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Appreciate you guys joining in this conversation. Pausing for a little bit, get honest about your life and your greatness and your genius and what God has for you. As Macy said in the last segment, you know, one of the saddest things is people who believe that their life doesn't matter, that they could be the ones that God would use to change the world. And we believe the opposite, because God says you are fearfully and wonderfully made. So we want to speak encouragement, life, and truth into you and help you do that. We do that at our organization, UPrint. Macy and her husband, Troy, do that at Access Yoga Plus Studio. We're all part of that family doing it together to help wake you up to the life you were created to live. So want to encourage you guys to check out the Portable Faith community. If you want encouragement, you want to be a part of this movement, you want to be a part of what we're doing, wakeupmyfaith.com. Macy, let's dive back into this conversation about seeds.
One thing I want to add.
Go ahead.
No, it's okay. That Portable Faith community, it's a couple cups of coffee in a month, and we reach out 25 times a month, typically with the weekdays, text, and you get something for it. But for a couple cups of coffee, we're saying buy us a couple cups of coffee. What that does is it supports when we work with people, and we work with people who can't pay us and help them get set free. And I just want to make sure people understand that this is every bit of a church and a ministry as it is a business. We're not selling text. We are helping set people free. And guess what? We're not asking just for a donation. We're saying you get something for your coffee. So I just really felt led to say that. This supports what we're doing on a big level. We want people to jump in there who are applauding us from a safe distance and say, you know, I'm in. It's nothing to me. I can do that. I can buy those guys cups of coffee because of what they're doing. So anyway, enough said. Macy, jump back on it. Sorry.
No, that's awesome,
just
man.
Wanted to
that's
get
awesome.
That out.
And Macy, I mean, you know, we're friends too, but I mean, you're a part of this. I'm a part of it. Kevin said we're all a part of this too. I mean, just to give your thought on it. I mean,
I was literally about to say, I'm so glad that Kevin said that, because that's so un-Kevin-like to go there. I'm like so excited right now.
The un-Kevin.
Yeah, that was really
Watch
good.
out.
Yes, Kevin.
You never know.
I was literally going to say, my husband and I signed up, and we get those messages every morning. And it feels like a disservice to say text message, because that's really not what it is. It's a message meant for the heart. And every time I open it, it comes around 5:30 a.m., which is about the time that we're usually up and running. And it comes at the right exact moment when I'm just like, oh, I forgot I get these messages. This is perfect. And it just really sets a foundation for your day. And if you've ever done a daily devotional, it's like that in the sense that it always meets you exactly where you need to be. But it's even more special because we get to know these people behind the message. And sometimes when you do a devotional, you can get back in that concept of like, oh, well, this person, that's just, they're so special and what a gift they have. And when you really know, like I know Kevin, and he constructs these messages from the heart, and I know they're just so spirit-led. And I know Matt, they're just these genuine people that have a heart for the word, and that have a heart for the Lord, and have a heart for helping others. And it is very inexpensive, but you really can't put numeric value on what you're going to gain. And I'm glad that they're talking about it, because more people need to know about it. And man, you got to get on this train, because these messages, you can't find them anywhere else. You really can't. They're so genuine to the heart. I love them.
Well, Macy, thanks so much for that. We certainly appreciate it. And I think it comes back to what we're talking about today, is the idea of a seed. And if a seed is planted, you mentioned water and light. So interesting that God is light. He spoke light into existence, right?
It's his creative force.
Yeah. And he's water, living water, you know. And so you mentioned that earlier.
Yep.
And so what we want to do is add water and light to people's lives to help them produce fruit. I mean, you know, to be what they were created to be. Oaks of righteousness. That's my favorite.
Ooh,
Isaiah
good.
61. So anyway, carry on with this thought about seeds.
So let's just identify it personally. Like, let's use this image. I'm going to give you an image and take it very personally. Each one of us, let's say, is handcrafted by the Creator as a seed. And he plants us deep into the soil, and it's dark, and it can be scary, but it doesn't have to be, because we know that the hand that planted us there also has a purpose for what each one of us is going to grow into. So as that seed, you get water, you don't see light yet, but you trust that as you continue to grow towards the path of where you are sensing that light coming from, which is really meant to develop our intuition and our trust in things that we cannot see yet, little bouts of fear come up and try to break apart this seed and make us have those shallow roots that we've been talking about. And so over the course of time, you spend more and more time with the Lord, and you start to develop this undeniable trust in what he's doing in your life. And so you have these other seeds that try to say, oh, grow this way, which is not towards the light, or, ooh, let's go the opposite way, which is down towards the center of the core, which will just completely burn you up. And let's just say that you are in a garden of 10 other seeds, and they're all doing whatever they feel like doing and not following the call to go directly towards the light. And you say, no, this is my path. And it might be the opposite direction of where any of y'all are headed, but I know deep in my spirit that this is where I'm supposed to go. And so as you start to follow this journey, as you receive the nourishment that you need through our Creator, you start to get these ideas about maybe who or what, this little seed that you don't know what you're supposed to be yet, because you just look like everyone else is going to be. You're like, well, man, my desire is to be a live oak, or my desire is to bear fruit, or my desire is to be a flower, or whatever it is. And so the point I'm trying to make here is in the first chakra, we set the foundation of trust, which eliminates fear. Our trust as Christians are in the Lord through Jesus Christ and the Spirit filling us up. And then there gets a point in your life where you start to walk with the Lord, and he places these desires on your heart, which is the second development in second chakra, which is Svadhisthana, where we start to get our emotional center. It's governed by the element of water. And so we start to grow, and we start to have these ideas of, man, I really desire to be around people, or I love speaking, or I love being in the Word, or I love playing sports, or whatever it is. And fear tries to creep in and say, well, that's selfish. Why do you think that you should be doing what you want to do? You have to work, and it can't be fun, right? And so then we start to say, oh, well, let me take the safe route, or whatever it is. And what I'm here to say is, when your foundation is secure, you've eradicated fear, and you have plans of how you're going to continue to eradicate fear by allowing yourself to receive daily message, or being in the daily message, or whatever works for you, God will place it on your heart, your own desires. And these desires are what is going to separate you and make you great. And why would he not place on our heart desires that are meant to be exactly what we are supposed to be in the long run, when we sprout out from the deep core and we get to see the light of day, and we blossom and bloom and become whatever it was that God was preparing for us in the darker times, the darker spaces of our life. And it's a beautiful process, and it all starts by a little tiny seed following the direction of where he feels or she feels called to go. Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I had somebody reach out to me the other day and said, hey, you said you need to, or you said, you mentioned me, I mentioned doing a course, which we already have it, but that incorporates exactly what you're talking about through physical, the yoga practice.
Yeah.
And so it's just funny. All this, everything you're talking about is in learning to feel the Word. It's in the spiritual cleanse. Exactly the same thing. Separating will versus desire. Jesus did that in the garden. So we have biblical foundations for practicing what you're talking about to an audience who doesn't always understand Christianity, at least up here.
Yep.
So side note is we do need to do that. Yes. Because it reaches more people. So I'm saying we 100% agree.
Yep.
But the wonderful thing about this is, and I was trying to put this into words the other day in a mentoring session, is there is a sweet spot where we know we can start to press into that with this wonderful courage that's in us, but we don't go too far with it and prophesy something that we're not sure about. So these motives don't come out of our head. They come from the depth. Wow. They come from below.
Yes.
And you just know. People have said to me for 10 years, more than that, how do you walk by faith? And what I've struggled to tell them, because it's different for everybody, is you have to get into that mode of intimacy with the Lord where you are, it's almost like you're praying what he puts on your heart instead of begging him to take care of you.
Wow.
And so it's not here. And that's where so many people get lost. This is the soul separation, soul and spirit. Has to be led by the Spirit. And it's wonderful. And when you're coming from that place, you know enough to keep taking steps. And you trust him because you feel his presence. And there's nothing like it. So getting people in that mode through yoga and time with God, or however you want to do it, it's like, this is it. You know,
Yes.
This is how we change the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is all incredibly powerful, guys. We got a short break here, so I don't want to lose it. But we'll be back for more right after this. Hello and welcome back to Wake Up Our Faith. This is the show where passion, purpose, and dreaming big challenge common sense. We like to think of it as a conversation to shed light on the upside of upside down living. As always, having a fantastic conversation today. Appreciate you guys joining us. We're live here every Wednesday in the Standard Glass Studios from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Rebroadcast on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7 FM every Sunday, 12 to 2. Appreciate Macy, as always, being here, just adding, your wisdom, encouragement, and of course Kevin as well. This is just so good. And I think we just want to, I'm tired of living in a world where everybody is letting fear dictate their life, period. And they're living shallow, half-hearted existences, like you said in the first hour, Kevin, being halfway cured of cancer and thinking it's like, oh, well, that's good enough.
Yeah, it ain't good enough. That's right. Yeah.
So anyway, that's my statement. So
I like it.
It starts with the beginning.
Yes.
And that is the seed. And so that seed idea, we had sent a text out the other day, and I don't even have it all in front of me, but it's funny. It ties right in. It's better to keep planting seeds than stand over the one and keep demanding that it grows. Patience equals finding peace in the obedience rather than in its results. So when you have a desire, when you know that you're growing, that little germination is starting to happen. When you know that about yourself, then that's the sweet spot. That's when you can be content just in the obedience of growth rather than the results, because you know God's going to carry out what he said. Just like David, David knew that he was going to have a victory where all of Israel was shuddering. So he didn't even need that big old armor.
Yeah.
He just ran. But that starts with a seed, and that's what we're talking about today in this hour especially, is letting that thing begin to grow and be desperate, but desperate in the right direction.
Yeah.
So.
There's a great analogy, and Macy, I don't want to cut you off here. It just made me laugh because I love this story. It's a type of bamboo tree that basically it grows nothing in the first 5 years, and in the last 5 weeks of its life, it grows 80 feet.
Yes.
And I can't think of the name of the type of tree.
It's Amazon.
Yes.
Amazon.com.
Something like that. Yeah, that's right.
No revenue or no profit for 12 years. And then all the things, the biggest thing
billions.
in the world. Yeah.
And it's crazy because the guy that I've heard tell the story, call it a bamboo seed. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, he's got in his front yard. He's like, I'm planting bamboo seeds. And he's like, hey, man, it's been 2 years, ain't nothing growing. 2 years later, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm planting bamboo seeds.
Yeah.
And then he walks out the next day, and he's 80 feet tall, and he's like, I told you.
Yeah.
That's God.
Well, that's right. We don't need to be sidetracked by anything. We need to keep going forward, but it all starts with who you are, recognizing that you're a seed of God, that He took time to make you, and that's what Macy was saying earlier.
Yeah.
So let's put a conclusion on that, something that our audience can walk away with and understand their role in the beginning.
Well, it's interesting that Matt brings that up because I've heard that story too. It's one of my favorites. And this tree or bamboo, I can't remember what it is that he's speaking about, is so interesting because it's also requires a ton of work. You have to water it every day. And you don't see the fruits of your work for way later. And exactly like he said, people start to think you're crazy. What could you possibly be doing? And I think it grows 50 feet in 3 weeks or something. Yeah. It's just so bizarre. It's like something whaling tree. I can't remember.
It's a Chinese bamboo tree. I just looked it up. That's what it is.
And it's just such a neat analogy. And so to try and tie up all of these things that we've spoken about, I think the easiest picture is this right here. When Israel finally wanted a king, even though God was their king, he was like, okay, I'll give you a king. And he chooses Saul, who looks the part and even acts the part at first. What a humble guy, right? Mm-hmm. And then his humility turns into arrogance because he starts to think that it's about him and what he deserves, and he becomes privileged, right? Mm-hmm. The expectation of what he deserves. Mm. And so all of a sudden, God's like, this is not our guy. I'm going to find a new guy. And what he finds is a young boy who is everything that God is looking for. He's not just humble, who will become arrogant. He is a person, a child after God's own heart. Mm-hmm. And what's so interesting is when Saul finds out that he's not going to be king anymore, it is his own disobedience that prevents him from continuing to be that kingship. And it wasn't like God was going to terminate that kingship immediately, because by the time he found out about this, David was still young. But then Saul spends the rest of his life trying to kill this king when really David was going to be the king of the lineage of the true king, right? So Saul had an opportunity to live out his purpose, but instead he used fear to diminish his purpose and then tried to ruin someone else's. And the first thing to take from this is there is not a single person that can take from you what God has planned to give you. Not a single person. And
that's why we want to unlock that in people.
Yes, exactly. And the reason why that's so important is because a lot of times conflict stems from fear of someone else taking what isn't even theirs.
Yeah.
And God will make sure that you have what you're supposed to have. So if you are doing an endeavor and you fail and try to blame it on someone else, as a matter of fact, you should maybe thank them, because what they've done is taught you a valuable lesson that things are not going to be successful on your own merit. And each one of us have our own stories about what that even means. And so what I invite each one of you to consider is this right here. We have a lot of shallow, uprooted trees right now in Wilmington, North Carolina. And we have an opportunity to start to plant seeds and water them daily that we ourselves may never see, because the life of a tree is hundreds of years. But hundreds of years from now, someone is going to sit in the shade of your hard work. And how could that be any sweeter? So the fruits of your labor are actually your labor. And the fruits of your labor can be someone else's rest. But we've got to stop thinking that by somebody sitting in your shade from your hard work that they're taking from you, because maybe you needed to learn the merit of work and they need to learn the merit of rest, and you get to be that catalyst. And so today I invite each one of you to plant a seed, and to let that seed be planted from a space of trust, a space of love, and a space of joy. And joy teaches us that that's a space of being. It is not a state of mind. Even though you may have sad days, they are not going to ever take away from this overabundance that you feel within your heart, this hope that you know that God has a plan for you and no one can take it. And when you're having hard times and other people seem to be doing better than you, it's because God is teaching you a lesson. And most of the time that lesson is going to be on ego, right? But sometimes it's going to be a lesson on reflecting your integrity and your humility. What is one of the most powerful books of the whole Bible? It's Job, because he was a good man even through the hard times. And it wasn't about him. It was about what he got to display to the world. But then there are other people that had to learn lessons. And so we're either called to be a Job or someone else within the Bible that was called to learn a lesson. And either way, what's meant to be yours can never be taken. The only way it's taken is if you stop living out your purpose and try to prevent someone else from living out theirs. And ultimately, you will be dethroned and you will not live out your purpose and you will live an empty life. Otherwise, you can rise to the glory of God. And so today, let's plant that seed.
Cool it off, Macy. I got to cool you down over here. That's just on fire.
Yeah. Well, that's something that definitely take time, listen to that again and digest it. Process it, and then keep planting seeds.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Your life matters to God. Your why. This is not about how the clock works. It's about what time it is. So let's get out of the logic and start doing our why. And that is to be the seed, but to keep planting seeds and not demanding that the other one hurry up and grow. So I just want to add that.
I love that.
That's the heart of David. It ain't about good behavior. There's no David in pulpits. There's a whole lot of King Sauls in pulpits. But we're about what God's doing. And that's being authentic and going completely with everything you got at this and knowing, why are you here? So keep planting, be the seed, keep planting seed. I don't want to water down anything you just said.
Oh, that's good.
But hopefully people will listen to it and listen to it and listen to it.
Thank you.
Well, the cool thing is people can, and we want to encourage you to do that. These videos are archived on Facebook. They're also archived on our YouTube channel. Guys, connect with us at youprint.life, youprint.life. You can have access to all of this, our podcast. As we said, we have a phenomenal resource to encourage you every single morning. Wake up, myfaith.com, the Portable Faith Community. Guys, it goes without saying. We are David prophesying our future. We are here to change this culture, to change this community, and therefore to change the world by investing in people to become God's expression here on the earth. We say it this way: God leaves his fingerprints on the world through yours. It's Matt Ham, Kevin Adams, Macy Cole. Thank you guys so much for joining us for Wake Up Our Faith. We'll be back next week, Wednesday, 1 to 3 p.m., right here at Big Talker Standard Glass Studios. You guys be blessed.